Hello, Bobby Torres of Frightbox recording here, and in today's video, I'm going to take you behind a brand new drum production and production in general that I'm currently working on in my project studio. But before we begin, I just want to let you know that if you're struggling to achieve the results that you're looking for in your home studio, I don't care if you're recording live drums, using MIDI drums, using amp sims, real amps, if you have a nice studio with acoustic treatment, or if you're working out of a bedroom or garage, it doesn't matter. The fact is that so many home studio owners lack the process and the attention to detail that's necessary in order to achieve a professional sounding production. And because of this, I'm offering you direct access right now for absolutely free to my polished production checklist. This simple, straightforward PDF checklist highlights all of these key areas that home studio owners tend to gloss over and will help point you in the right direction so you can achieve professional sounding results with the gear you're currently using. Again, the PDF is absolutely free and you can have direct access right now by clicking the link below in this video's description. Now, I just wrapped up production on a single with my good friends in a band called Mainline, and I figured I'd share a little bit of the drum recording process, my approach, and how I achieved a pro-level drum mix even though I'm working out of a budget project studio. So without any further ado, let's dive into it. All right, it is Saturday. No, excuse me, it is Sunday, October 2nd. Got the drums all in tune, got here about an hour ago. Just did a little bit of studio cleanup. Mr. Ben Karras, another producer that uses his studio, was doing a bunch of work, I think this past week with a band called Everdawn, and I just had to do a little bit of cleanup. And the guys in Mainline should be here pretty soon. It's around 11:50, 10:50, something like that. No, it's 11:50. The band's gonna get here at noon. Once the drummer is here, he's gonna bring in his hardware, cymbal stand, cymbals. I guess we might use his snare this time. We'll see how it's sounding. Snare stand, pedals. Then we'll get it set up, get it mic'd up, get some drum sounds, and we will record the drums for this single. So here I am miking up the kit. The drums were already pre-tuned. I did that before the band even got there. For the toms, I'm using simple SM57s. They do the trick. Pointed directly at the top head toward the center of the head where the drummer will attack the head for maximum attack. And I'm using an SM57 for all of the toms, the 2 rack toms and the floor tom. I'm also using SM57s here on the top head of the snare, as well as the bottom head of the snare drum. And here I am laughing like an idiot. Mic placement is everything. It's really important to take your time and get it right. All right, here I am close miking the cymbals. No traditional overhead placement. I want to bring out those crashes nice and clear and reject the hi-hat. For my main crashes, I'm using SM81s. And for my ride cymbal and my hi-hat, I am using my good friend Ben Karras, who's another producer who records out of my studio. I'm using his vintage Octavia microphones, which are really nice as well. And again, I'm close miking the bell of the ride just for extra clarity. And same goes for the hat. Now, here I am miking the kick drum with a Hale microphone. I do not remember the exact name. Again, it belongs to Mr. Ben Karras. I've been using it. A little thuddier than my typical kick drum mic, but it does the trick. And here is a sped up scene of me applying all of the cables to the microphones. I like to use nice short cables connected to a snake for super quick setup and breakdown. Here we are recording a scratch track of the song. Now the band already did pre-production, so the pre-production tempos were all mapped out. We just decided on the day of tracking to adjust a few tempos. So I had Johnny, the singer slash guitar player, re-record his scratch track so it's fresh to the fresh tempos for the drummer to play along to. Click tracks are important, pre-production is important, and just getting things right at the source before we record anything, super important. It's gonna make mixing these tracks so easy. Guys, how do you feel about that take?
Pretty good. Pretty solid.
Are we Gordon Ramsay?
Gordon Ramsay, yeah.
Okay, so the drums are done. I'll just do a quick rundown of the setup. We have a 4-piece kit, 5-piece kit, I always forget. It's a 4-piece, right? Because we have the kick, 2 toms, and a floor tom. And it's your snare. What kind of snare drum is this?
I want to say that's a Yamaha recording?
Yeah, it's a deeper snare, but we actually tuned it up. So it's a higher pitch, but there's still some low punch to it, which is cool. 57s on the toms, 57 on the bottom snare, 57 on the top snare, 57 again on the toms. We have close mics, or relatively close mics on the cymbals, SM81 capturing both the China and drummer's right crash. And then there's a vintage Octavia, which is my good friend Ben Karas's on the bell portion of the ride. There's an SM50, or excuse me, a SM81 on the left crash, and then another Octavia on the hi-hat. Forgot what that was called for a second. And then up here, we have a cheapo pair of Samson CO2 condensers that are actually up in the corner that you can't even see, that are permanently fixed there just to capture the sound of the room. And there's a there is an Audio-Technica PZM mic behind the shelf by my TV there, and where all the mic cables are, that's permanently fixed behind the shelf. We also have 2 more microphones that are patched in here that are set up as a stereo pair in this hallway to capture the sound of the hallway. And as you can hear, ha, ha, it's a very live hallway, and I'm using a stereo pair of SM81s, and that's sort of my secret to achieve a big drum sound without having to use reverbs on the drums, is that the sound of this hallway sounds like a big room. So you have the tighter sound in here of the room itself, because this is a relatively dead sounding room, and then you also have the verb out there, which acts like natural reverb, so you technically don't even have to use reverb. And that's it for this very simple setup. All drums are being ran through the Market Unicorn or Motu 8 Pre ES. And I have an additional 8 Pre here, just the regular 8 Pre. And then an Arturia 8 Pre as well. So a total of 24 inputs, all going into my 2012 MacBook Pro, straight into Pro Tools. So there you have it. All right, so here we are. We have fast forwarded in time to about 2 weeks later. The entire production is done. We've recorded all the guitars, all the vocals, bass, putting the final touches on the mixes right now, and I'm getting ready to send it to the band. And I just want to run through some of my drum mixing techniques to showcase how I make this work, how I produce a pro level drum mix, even though, as you could see, I'm recording out of a pretty low budget space. Let's be real, with some pretty low budget equipment. Let's check out the drum mix, and we'll go over a few key points. Let's see what we got. So in my opinion, that's a pretty big sounding drum sound. Now the band stressed to me right from the get-go that they wanted a hard-hitting drum sound that was natural and big, but didn't utilize a bunch of artificial reverb. Now, as you saw in the earlier parts of the video, my studio is very tight, very small and very dead. So I had to get creative with both my recording process and my mixing process. And it all boils down to 3 key areas that anyone can utilize within any space. Key number 1 to achieving a big natural drum sound, even if you're recording in a less than ideal space like I am, is to utilize extra room mics, even if your space doesn't sound that great. Now, if we listen to my drums in solo, let's check them out once more. I have 5 room mics going. Actually, one of them is muted. I did not use the mono room that's behind my shelf. I'm using my 2 room mics that are up in the corner of my room, as well as my hallway mics. Let's hear what the mics up in the corner of my room sound like. I'm gonna turn them up a little. So as you can hear, when I muted the mics, my drums got super duper dead. So they do help add a natural ambience around the kit. And this is an area I just wanted to touch on because so many people skip out on room mics if they're recording in a smaller space because they think it's a waste of time. It's definitely not a waste of time, totally worth doing, and helps add extra glue and realism to your kit. But the big tamale here for me are my hallway mics. Let's hear what these hallway mics are doing to my drum sound. So as you can hear, they almost sound like reverb. And again, this is a hallway that's outside of my drum room. So if you're recording in a tight space, you can experiment with sticking a mic or two outside of your room, maybe in a hallway that's right outside your door. Maybe your drum room is next to your garage and you can stick a mic in your garage or in a bathroom, anywhere else that's a little more reverberant and less dead than the space you're currently recording in. Again, most of us in our home studios would never think in a million years to stick a mic in some crazy space like this, but as you can hear, it's adding a huge amount of size in a very organic and natural way to my drum sound. So that's number one when it comes to achieving a big natural drum sound, even if you're recording in a less than ideal space. Point number two that I like to bring up is simple. It's just get the right performance out of the drummer. As you could hear, the drummer is slamming away on the kit. It doesn't matter how you mix your drums, what fancy trickery you try to whip out when it comes to your drum mix. If your drummer is not hitting the drums with force, you are not going to achieve a big, hard-hitting drum sound. I know this is more of a source thing, but at the end of the day, if the attitude isn't right in the performance, it's very hard to manufacture later. So make sure your drummer, or if you're the drummer, is hitting hard if you want a hard-hitting big drum sound. And tip number three that people don't talk about enough is using saturation in your production. Now, as you can see in my studio, I just use a basic USB interface, and I don't care what anyone says. When you dig into the science of how interfaces actually work, you could be using the cheapest modern day interface under the sun and you could achieve crystal clear audio. The problem is that the audio is too clear, too clean. As human beings, we love the sound of saturation and what analog naturally imparts on a signal. So if you're not using an analog console, if you're not using a tape machine or a lot of outboard gear, you're gonna have to muck up and dirty the sound intentionally within your DAW. And if you look at my drum mix here, I'm using a bunch of different saturation and I don't overthink it. So for example, on my kick and snare, I have some console emulation. On my cymbals here, I have a little bit of a stock saturator within my DAW, along with some console emulation. And even my rooms, I'm adding a bunch of distortion to, not overt distortion, just enough to kind of add some extra fuzz around the sound, almost like I'm hitting a tape machine hard. And that immediately will make your mix sound more like a professional record. Because we have to remember, when we think about an album in our mind, we're thinking about the history of music and all of those classic records that were recorded onto tape, through a console, all of that nice analog goodness that we now have to intentionally put into our mixes, especially if you're recording in a project studio like I am, when you're recording straight into an interface. And finally, in this mix to glue my drums together, I'm using a tape saturator. This helps lop off additional transient and helps warm up and glue my drums together, again, just as if they were recorded onto tape. And that's it. As you can tell, my approach isn't rocket science. It's all about how I utilize the tools that I have at my disposal. And again, if you're producing music out of your project studio, do not skip over all of the key elements that so many of us tend to gloss over. Make sure you're focusing on the right things so you can achieve the results that you really want. And again, if you need some guidance in this department and some help along the way, you can download my Polished Production Checklist for absolutely free so you can refer to it and achieve better results with the gear you're currently using right within your home studio. So I'm curious to know, what do you think of my drum recording process? Is it similar to what you utilize in your own home studio, or do you approach drum production and drum recording in a completely different way? Let me know by leaving a comment in the comment section below. I'd love to hear your opinion. And also, if you've liked what you heard in this video, you could check out more of Mainline's music, and you can even hear them perform live in my studio. There's a link below in this video's description. Just click the link and hear more from a great up-and-coming hard rock metal band. If you found this video helpful, like, comment, subscribe, and share. And do not forget to click the little bell icon so you can be notified every time I upload weekly videos on all things metal and rock production. Until next time, happy mixing.